Hello Blazers, welcome to episode 88 of UAB Green and Told, original debut Monday, January 2nd, 2023. Through our podcast, we are given the chance to share stories from members of the UAB community. Want to listen to past episodes of Green and Told? Check us out at alumni.uab.edu/Green and Told on Spotify or the Apple Podcast app. And while there, we'd love for you to leave a written review so more alums can find us. I'm Greg Berry, a UAB alum and Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. For many of us, we can tell when a product needs improving, but may not know exactly what or how to do it. That's not the case for today's guest. No, when a problem pops into Forrest Satterfield's mind, he's already processing ways that product can be improved. While the end result may not immediately be known, as Forrest will share, he knows he'll be able to get there.
From a kid of I may not know how to do it yet, but I will know how to do it, and I'm fairly certain I can do it better. So there definitely was a cockiness to it.
And as a college student, Forrest was already working on ways to improve products. Even with a full class load with endless study sessions, he was working hard to ensure he found success.
Just working until, from sun up to sundown, just working on this idea and kind of going through it and refining it.
Plus, hear about his latest venture, one that's working with things that could easily be struggles you and I could be dealing with at any moment.
We looked at and saw with the medical bills is that about 80% of medical bills have errors.
Hailing from Rocket City, USA, it's not surprising that at one point, Forrest Satterfield wanted to be an astronaut, taking flight and traveling into outer space. But his career trajectory turned away from moon rocks and stars and turned towards technology to help us Earthlings. Before we discover how Satterfield Technologies and Barrabill got started, we need to know more about Forrest himself.
So I grew up in a very heavy aerospace engineering, defense industry kind of family. And from a young age, I knew I wanted to be an engineer, involved in engineering. I would say probably the first thing I wanted to be was an OBGYN, because I was told I was great with kids, and I didn't know what an OBGYN was. It was just that it was a doctor that dealt with kids, was the way I was told. Then it was astronaut, and I wanted to be an astronaut up until I decided to shadow a prosthetics clinic in high school. And what I noticed was all of my ideas in aerospace engineering had already been done, but none of the stuff that I was thinking about from a biomedical standpoint was. And Huntsville was a very tech-heavy city. I remember, so for example, the James Webb telescope, that was manufactured partially here, and my dad was involved in that. And so there was a time in, I want to say, high school when I was walking underneath the James Webb telescope in a full clean suit, just kind of taking it all in. And the big thing was, and not to gloss over my childhood, but kind of get back to that prosthetics clinic, I knew how much stuff cost from a defense or an aerospace side, and kind of how much technology in general costs. When I was shadowing the prosthetic clinic, there was a guy working there who had a prosthetic leg. And this kind of gives you an idea of what I was like, especially as a kid. I looked over at him and I said, "How much does that leg cost?" And he said $30,000. And I said, "Well, shoot, I could do that for $15,000 and make a huge difference in this guy's life." And that's kind of what got me started from there.
Early on, you kind of had that entrepreneurial mindset in your head. Was there other...
Because I was told if I wanted to build the stuff I wanted to work on, I had to start my own company. If I work for somebody else, I have to build their stuff. But if I work for myself, I can build the stuff I want to build.
So that obviously appealed to you. So did you take that conversation that you had with that gentleman with his leg and kind of start thinking about, what can I do to lay the foundation for a future business?
Immediately, because I had seen Iron Man. So I was already thinking about exoskeletons and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, this is how we could do this, and this is how we could do that. But also it's just, what was shocking to me was the fact that the leg that he was using wasn't motorized or anything like that. It wasn't particularly an advanced piece of tech. and I was like, well, we can do so much. There's always a bit of ego in every engineer of like, I can do that better. And that was something that was always in me, even like from a kid, of like, I may not know how to do it yet, but I will know how to do it. And I'm fairly certain I can do it better. So there definitely was a cockiness to it. But there's a lot of precedent, because of course, by the time I would get to the point to where I could actually make something or be involved in that, the technology would have progressed significantly. So it was an inevitable kind of cockiness, I guess, of like, I know by the time I get there, we'll be able to make it better, which, of course.
So what kind of steps did you take before you came to UAB to kind of start the groundwork for what would become Satterfield Technologies, or did anything shape around that time?
Oh, I was trying to start businesses since I was like middle school. And the hard thing is raising funding when you're in middle school. I got to tell you,
Yeah.
it was definitely my parents were supportive. They wanted me to kind of pursue that, but at the same time, I had to have a pretty airtight business model in order to get funding in that situation, and that was something that I was lazy to do. So what I would do is I'd try and get a business off the ground with no funding. So the first thing I did was I started making skim boards because I was into that. So I'd buy a piece of wood, watch a YouTube video on how to turn that into a skim board. And so we made that, and I was like, okay, now what? And we didn't really get much past that. And then I was playing lacrosse in high school, and I noticed that there were wooden lacrosse sticks. So I reached out to all the wooden lacrosse stick manufacturers, set up a website, and had a central website for buying any kind of wooden lacrosse stick across the country. And I was like, all right, we're good. I've got samples. And then I went to college. And so that kind of fell by the wayside because I didn't have the time to go up to Huntsville and sell wooden lacrosse sticks and then back down to Birmingham. And I didn't make the connection that there was a demand in Birmingham that I could be selling to there. So it was definitely, I was always a lot more farther along on the engineering side of like actually getting product or getting something like that done rather than the business side. That one developed a lot later.
You grew up in Huntsville. You're close to Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Huntsville, obviously, Birmingham. Why UAB?
It was a university that offered biomedical engineering, which is what I wanted to go into in the state. And also I saw a lot of potential in Birmingham, especially at that time. I would drive around downtown and you'd see these big historic buildings that were like abandoned. And I was like, we could get that for a good deal. And then my office will go here, and then we'll build manufacturing there. And so I saw, all this potential in the city, and that really excited me more than any other. I mean, you look at Stanford or Harvard, or you look at any other kind of like big universities, and you look around and he's like, well, where do I grow? It was always, everything costs so much money. And I was like, well, what we can do is we can bootstrap here in Birmingham. We can get it off the ground. And then, as we grow, it's not at the loss of other people. My success is not at someone else's failure, as it might be in like a Silicon Valley or something like that, where everything is so highly competitive, hiring people, getting office space, everything else like that. And I just wanted to be successful without it being hurting or at the detriment of other people.
You got involved by kind of jumping in head first and starting businesses. And let's talk a little bit about Satterfield Technologies. You started that your sophomore year, and it became the first student startup at Innovation Depot. I'm guessing that stemmed from that question you had with the gentleman with the leg years ago.
Yeah. So when I came to UAB, I hit the ground running. So I went over to, it was EITD. It was the Center for Biophysical Sciences and Engineering at the time. I went over there and I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to build this. I want to build prosthetics that are affordable for people. And the people there, we had Dr. Lee Marotti, who I believe is retired now, and Samuel Misko, and Dr. David Brown, who's at another university now. And they would sit down with me every week, and they would listen to this kid who doesn't know what he's doing. And I'd be like, this is what I'm thinking. And then they say, well, you're going to have to do this, and this. And I'd say, all right, I'll go do that. And then I'd come back the next week and I'd be like, this is the progress I made. Okay, you need to do this, and this. And I mean, they were incredibly patient, incredibly helpful, because it's what allowed me and helped me develop my idea to the point to where I got into CGIU. So I was also, and that's what I built off of from that into, I believe that's what got me into the Innovation Depot, was the fact that I had already made all this progress up to that point in terms of developing out the idea and the product and everything like that.
So this was just about 10 years ago when you joined the Innovation Lab at Innovation Depot. What was the experience like? How many people were there? And here you are, the only student at the time.
Yeah, so it would fluctuate from day to day, because it's not like there weren't other students that were getting into the space and using the space. At the time, so I had gotten my first 3D printer. Unfortunately, the way that I had, my grandfather passed away, and he left me about $2,500, which was just enough money to get the 3D printer that we needed. And so it was this very kind of serious moment of like, okay, well, this is the last thing he left me, and now I'm going to put this into pursuing this business. And so I had my 3D printer, and I was going through prototypes. Basically, I would 3D. I started with a foot ankle brace, because that was that's one of the devices that's in high demand. So instead of starting off with prosthetics, I started with orthotics, because there was a lot more people that could help with the idea that we would go back around into prosthetics with what we've learned from orthotics. So I was working in the lab, and I would 3D print out these different prototypes, and I'd put them into my shoe, and I'd walk around in them, and I'd be like, all right, this is comfortable, this is not comfortable. And I just kind of had this corner of the lab space where I had these two giant whiteboards that were already there, and I'd fill them up with calculations or flows of like the user interface of how it would work, or the business model, or just like research and information that I had found, different sources that I would go to. And that's how I'd spend most of my, I spent, I would say 90% of my weekends in that space, just working until, from sun up to sundown, just working on this idea and kind of going through it and refining it.
How has the business trajectory been over the last few years? Here we are, 2022, with the debut in 2019 of that first brace. Where have you gone to?
Well, we were contacted by the state Alabama Prosthetics and Orthotics Organization and said, you're acting as an orthotist. We disagree with. We believe that we are a device manufacturer. We're not an orthotist, but based off how the law is written, we are. So we had to pause that. So we're currently in a holding pattern in that realm, which is frustrating, because it felt like the people that we were building this for to help, which was not just for the patients, but to make it easier for the prosthetist and the orthotist, that was frustrating. We're still trying to figure out how to best move forward there. But it didn't really matter, because at the same time that happened was when the pandemic happened. We decided to see if we could make N95 face masks. The way that N95 face masks are normally made is you have hot plastic gets shoot through a die up against the wall, and that's how the fiber and everything is made. And those machines are millions of dollars. So suddenly there was no N95 mask available. Was there a way for us to make that material without, purchasing a multi-million-dollar machine? And it turns out you can, using electrospinning. Turns out there was a manufacturer up in Tennessee. So what we did is we reached out to them and had these circular filters made. N95 tested, proven. In fact, we had UAB ER doctors using our face mask. But then what we did is, so we used less material, and then we would 3D scan your face with an iPhone, and then 3D print a custom fit face mask. And so using what we learned from manufacturing the 3D printed knee braces, we just readjusted our manufacturing setup, and we started making face masks. And that blew up literally overnight. So we got over 100 orders in a night. And then I spent the next year and a half working on that to absolute burnout, more burnt out than I was already burnt out going into it. I was crispy at that point. There was not much left. So I had to take a break, and I decided to come back up and spend some time with my parents, who I hadn't seen in a year and a half because of the pandemic. And at that point, I decided to apply to Generator, which was a business accelerator. And I started Bear Built through that.
Talk a bit about Bear Built, because this is kind of a shift a little bit, because this isn't necessarily a product, but a way to help people basically in the insurance industry.
Yeah, this is my first. I prefer hardware and product development. Software is definitely easier in a lot of ways. I know I'm saying that the people who are involved in software development, I'm sure, very much disagree. There are definitely pros and cons to it, but this was the first one where I said, all right, so Generator invests $100,000, and I said, all right, well, what do you want me to do with it? And they said, you start a business, and it has to be related to healthcare, and it has to be software. And so at the time, what I was wanting to do was to get into hospitals, because we had such huge burnout for people, and I wanted to work on something to improve essentially the logistics of a hospital. But we couldn't get into a hospital because of the pandemic stage at that time. And so I said, oh, all right, well, we can't build a product without talking to users. So what users related to healthcare can we talk to? And there was a lot of people at the time who were giving birth that happened to be a part of Generator, having kids. And so we talked to them, and we saw their bills. And I knew that medical billing was a problem all the way back to 2013, because that was one of the big things that was talked about with the prosthetics and the orthotics, was how are you going to get reimbursed? Insurance, and it's a nightmare. And I've always heard horror stories when it comes to making medical products, because it was always about but how are you going to get paid, and how are you going to do this? So there was something that I was already familiar with. And what we looked at and saw with the medical bills is that about 80% of medical bills have errors. And that's based off of statistics provided outside of Bear Built. So those were statistics we found outside of them. And we said, all right, so 80% contain errors. Let's see if we can find any errors on the ones that the people we know have. And we did. And then we said, all right, can we automate the detection of these errors? And that was really the big innovation. Was medical bill auditing has been around for a while now, but it's always been a human process. It's always been a human involved in reviewing everything. And our big innovation, or our big change, is that we automatically can go through a bill. You take a picture of a bill, and we automatically pull that information, and then we check it against our system's information, and then we're able to determine whether or not there's an error there and report that back.
When it comes to Bear Built, where do you see it growing, and how has it grown so far since September?
So you've got four big entities in our healthcare institution, which is you have patients, you have employers, you have healthcare providers, and you have insurance. And these four groups fundamentally lack trust between all of them. And you see that a lot in terms of people posting online about, what does this bill mean? I don't understand. They think they've already paid for something. They're getting duplicate bills, stuff like that. For employers, it's okay, well, we have a third-party administrator managing our negotiated prices and facilitating our plan, but we've actually gone in and looked at those negotiated prices, and they're much worse. In fact, there are a lot of situations where, or that we're finding right now, where the negotiated prices are more expensive than if you had no insurance whatsoever. Then for the healthcare providers, it's talking to insurance and saying, okay, we've done this procedure, getting properly reimbursed. And then for insurance, it's saying, okay, but how do we know that so-and-so said that they received care? And if they want to check to make sure that that's true, that's a human audit that they have to go through, and it's this whole big long process. So I see Bear Built as really acting as a trusted entity between all of these groups. And so what's going to be really important is that we don't position ourselves as being the representative of any one group. We are simply checking the data and making sure that it's accurate, and we're not choosing teams. In a lot of ways, acting as a referee, saying that an apple's an apple, an orange is an orange, and moving forward the conversation that way. And so what that does, although it seems relatively simple on its face, is dramatically speed up payments, people getting reimbursed, people getting stuff paid. And it also reduces a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of confusion, especially on the provider, patient, employer side of like what's going on. Not to say that insurance doesn't have different things that we can help them with, but right now what we're seeing a lot of demand from is from the provider side for generating the bill in the first place, and then making sure that they're getting properly reimbursed for insurance providers, and then from a patient/employer side of making sure that they have coverage in the first place. How much are they going to pay? Where do you go to get the best negotiated rate given your plan? So that's like a real big one that we've seen, which is depending on the plan that you have. And right now you have no way of knowing this, but depending on the plan that you have, if you go to one hospital, you get, let's say it's $100. You go down to the hospital down the street, it's $10,000. You would have no way of knowing that doesn't have any errors. That doesn't have any kind of issues. We can prevent that from happening in the first place and say, okay, given what kind of care that you need, this is where you should go given your plan. Or given the kind of care that you need, this is the kind of plan that you should get when that comes around.
Doubling back a little bit, your entrepreneurial spirit kind of led you to found the UAB Makerspace during your junior year on campus. Why did you feel there was a need to have Makerspace, and how has it kind of developed over time?
Yeah, so that was through, I became a University Innovation Fellow, which was a fantastic experience. That got me into design thinking, which is like the fundamental, like that's the foundation of my company today, or any company that I'm involved with, is this design thinking, talking to the people, understanding what the problem is before moving forward, which in healthcare, that is a complicated task. That's a lot of interviews and talking to different people, just because of how intricate the system can be. A lot of times you see a problem and it turns out it's a symptom of something completely different. So the Makerspace was my UIF project. So as a University Innovation Fellow, our purpose was to increase innovation and entrepreneurship on campus. And so I posed the question to our faculty sponsors. I said, how would you like us to do that? Because that's a pretty, how do you define innovation? How do you define entrepreneurship? How would we measure our success? And we eventually did come up with those metrics, but they suggested Makerspace. So this is a situation where I pretty much focused most of my time, if not all of it, away from my company and temporarily on the Makerspace, because I saw it as this great, so if I'm going to build a company, I need people. And if we have people who are trained in these different mindsets and tools and have experience in these innovative and entrepreneurial endeavors in college, then by the time they leave, and they're ready for me to hire, and I can bring them on. So I was thinking about this from a pipeline perspective. So we got the Makerspace started in the library, the UAB library. We went in there, got that space. Dean Alexander, he was Dean Ewan Alexander at the time. He helped us get a wall put in. So before that, it was all completely open. So, the first version of the Makerspace was 5 3D printers chained to a wall. And I would have to, I spent most of my time in that space in the library, just kind of like watching and making sure that they're fine as they're printing. Because when I left, if we didn't have a volunteer in there or anything like that, somebody could just walk up to the 3D printer and just start messing around with it. Now that never happened because we have great students that go to UAB and they're a fantastic student population. But we eventually got the wall in. We got involved in the way that I saw the Makerspace growing, or any Makerspace, is that Makerspace is a reflection of the surrounding environment. So like a Makerspace out in rural Alabama would look very different than something in the middle of the city of Birmingham, because the Makerspaces are supposed to be addressing problems within those communities. So we got involved in a lot of different projects. So we got involved in Baja racing. We got involved in the UAB solar house that went out to Colorado. We we were involved in Barber Motorsports. We went out there and we actually were getting feedback from them on our pitch for Baja racing. And I was like, hey, could we do some 360 videos or some VR stuff out here? And they paid for the cameras, and we went out and did that. And so it was a lot of trying to establish these relationships with these different groups. The idea behind the Makerspace was you were using the Makerspace through these different projects, through partnering with different organizations in the community, and that was how students would be able to get involved. And so they had these real world examples of like, okay, here are the mindsets and tools we're wanting you to use, and here's how, and you're applying them experientially.
When it comes to the relationship with UAB, how has that kind of fostered a sense of success or helped in your success in your young professional career?
The people of UAB, faculty, the staff, people who work there have been fantastically supportive. Everything that I did at UAB was in most cases the first time. So I first with CGIU, with University Innovation Fellows, with getting into Innovation Depot. And so you're always at the mercy of others, you know, when you're at the first, because there's no precedent. There's, you know, how are we going to do this? And so it's a lot of flying by the seat of your pants. And I always enjoyed working with the different faculty and staff here at UAB, because they were willing to give me the time and work with me to develop these projects. Not to say that, you know, everything that a student accomplishes at UAB is definitely their own. And, you know, they're not going to hold your hand. But at the same time, I don't see how I would have been able to do all the things that I did at another university. Not even close. I'm incredibly fortunate to have gone to UAB. And I'm actually a little bit jealous now with the new entrepreneurship program at UAB. And, you know, there's so much that I was able to be involved with, but I continue to look at the campus and I see like, I want to, you know, maybe I could go back. Maybe there's another major I could do or something to really take advantage of all the new stuff that they have offering. It's incredibly exciting to see what's going there. And I think if they continue to invest in the innovation and entrepreneurship geared educational learning and these opportunities to build out, it's absolutely thrilling.
That's Forrest Satterfield. Forrest earned his BS in biomedical engineering in 2018 from the UAB School of Engineering. Today, he's CEO of Satterfield Technologies and Chief Technology Officer at Barabille. As one of the first UAB students accepted into the Clinton Global Initiative University, Forrest has his own idea of what it means to be a Blazer.
To be a Blazer, for me, meant I worked my ass off 90% of the time. And then 10% of the time, I always had friends I could go back to, and we could go party and have fun. And I always felt like there was people who wanted to be involved, who wanted to be a part of what I was doing or what I was building. And to have that kind of support and acceptance, absolutely phenomenal. And has been hugely impactful in my own success and future. I never felt alone at UAB.
I'd like to invite you to listen into previous episodes of UAB Green and Told. Check us out at alumni.uab.edu/Green and Told. Have a story to share or know someone we should reach out to? Email greenandtold@uab.edu. Finally, be sure to follow us on social media. Search UAB Alumni on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for listening, and until next time, go Blazers.